Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to be discussing cyber attacks via user impersonation, verifying user identity at the help desk. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So we've got the talk today scheduled for 30 minutes. As always, we always put time for Q&A at the end. During the talk, at any time, you can submit questions and they'll be queued up for us to answer at the end of the call. We also have a number of attachments available via the attachments link, and the slide deck will be made available there after the call as well as the on-demand video will be available. You'll also get an email when that's finished, so it will be available in your inbox. Today's speaker, we have Darren James from SpecOps. He's our password security and authentication guru that we have here. He's been working in the IT industry for over 20 years now, across many different companies and industries. And he has a specialism in Active Directory, Azure AD, and group policy. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Darren.
Thanks very much, John. So nice to talk to everybody today. Who are SpecOps? That's kind of, I guess, where I always like to start. So we're a privately owned company, been going for 20 years now. It's our 20th anniversary. Thousands of customers spread all over the world. Offices in Sweden, that's where we're headquartered. I'm based in the UK. Also local offices in Germany, France, United States and Canada, and hopefully in the Far East very soon. And yes, as John's already mentioned, we specialize in password security and authentication solutions. So as John's already mentioned, today we're going to be talking about someone compromising the service desk or compromising the service desk by pretending to be a valid user. How do we verify who's on the other end of the phone or who's on the other end of a Teams chat or whatever it might be? And there's just a couple of examples that have hit the news relatively recently. So the one that you can see on the slide in front of you right now, the Electronic Arts, big game producer, they were hacked back in June this year. Someone managed to convince the support team that they were a proper user, and they sent them an access token, and they were therefore able to connect to the network of Electronic Arts and leaked 780 gigabytes of data. So, yep, this is all about someone convincing a service desk agent that they aren't, or they are who they say they are. The other one as well, there's an energy firm recently that they were scammed out of 220,000 euros, amazingly enough. UK based. This one was a little bit more elegant, I guess you could say. They actually used a deep fake voice generator. So they captured this guy's voice and altered it to replay their own message, and got someone to transfer a bunch of money from their account to a hacker's account or a bad actor's account. So we can see these sorts of attacks evolving over time. They used to be quite. They used to attack the defenses, the firewalls themselves, but these days those defenses are so tough for hackers. They're going for the easier option, which is the soft option, the human option, and that's really what we're talking about today. So we recently ran a survey, and we can see that we had 261 responses to this, and less than 50% of the people that responded do any type of verification with inside their network when someone contacts the service desk, for instance. And of those 50%, only 9% are doing it right. So they're using some kind of third-party authenticator. The others, well, they're still relying on common information that's found in HR or an Active Directory. And remember, anything stored in AD, or most things stored in AD, are read-only to anybody else in Active Directory. So not terribly secure. And then other people are relying on things like ID numbers. And, everybody wears a kind of identity card around their chest these days, or around their neck these days. And normally you find the ID number printed on the ID card. And of course, again, that's still potentially visible to anybody in the HR department, and therefore usually anybody in the IT department. So not always the most secure or valid or verifiable, authentic piece of information to verify that user on. So, and of course, a common sort of scenario is this case that has been recently published on Spiceworks. So these guys have they've taken over a leg of the company, got 100 new users. So, even in an SMB environment, it's still pretty important. But they've got no idea who these people are at the other end of the phone. It's a remote office. There's 100 people there that the service desk have never met. How will they handle that sort of common and very security sensitive task of a password reset request if it comes from these remote users? And that's kind of the case that we'll be looking at today. And we can see those service desk password resets, they can make up quite a large volume of calls. So again, we're looking at, that's quite a nice soft target for an attacker to hit. So they'll contact the service desk. They'll maybe put the service desk under pressure. Maybe it's a Monday morning. They've got thousands of other calls all coming in from legitimate users. And then under pressure to solve that problem for that user as soon as possible. And the service desk call itself, a password reset call itself can cost anywhere between $15 to $70 per call. And that's, that's downtime to the user when they're not, generating money by doing their normal day-to-day job. That's also downtime to the service desk agent and the IT team while they're also trying to sort that problem out while the user's sat on the other end of the phone. So we need to try and make a slick and secure method of verifying those people on the other end of the phone. And we could, consider adopting multi-factor authentication for this sort of request, along with self-service. So, get the users to reset their own passwords, unlock their own accounts. They don't necessarily need to talk to the service desk to achieve those sorts of things these days. That can all be done via other systems that are available on the market. But sometimes users will still need to contact the service desk. And that's where we need to then typically handle that call in a secure way. So how do we verify the user? So as I mentioned earlier, social engineering, so pretending to be someone that you're not, is certainly on the rise, and certainly it's evolving in its sophistication. Being able to recognize somebody's voice and say, oh yeah, that's Darren on the other end of the phone, or that's John on the other end of the phone, that's not really a valid way of authenticating someone. So really we need to find a way of using more than one factor of authentication if we can. And also if we can take advantage of the simple sort of statement that if you can have something that you have, let's say your phone, something that a secret question or an answer to a question or a one-time code, or also something that you are, probably most importantly, maybe a fingerprint or a biometric of some kind, Face ID, Touch ID. Those are common things that we see on phones these days. Then, if we can have a combination of those, then we're going to be in a pretty good position to verify that it is that user on the other end of that on the other end of that phone or the other end of that communication device. So let's have a look at these factors in a little bit more detail. So we've got things like personal information, and I've broken them down here into something something you have, and then something you are. The red ones are probably the weaker ones. The yellow ones are a little bit better, but still have some flaws. The green ones are pretty good. So something personal information, what's your next of kin, your postcode, your home telephone number. They're not terribly good ways of identifying people because they're so well known. If even if it was like, what's your favorite film? If you can see on the wall behind me, picture of the Death Star, I guess you can all kind of know the answer to that question if that ever came up about me. And it's those sorts of things that make it so easy for us to gather information about other people, and especially with the rise of social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram, all of those things, people tend to put their interests on. And so, what's your favorite car, or what's the first school that you went to? All of those things are very easily engineered out of somebody just by looking at their social media profile. Um, Email, yeah, well, email's okay. We could send one-time codes via email. Um, Depends on the strength of your email account, though, at that point. So, if it's a personal email address, have you shared that your account logon details with anybody else? Is there two-factor authentication enabled on those email accounts? So, if it's just a weak password and it's been shared with a bunch of other people, maybe in the family, then it's probably not such a good way of identifying people. But if it is, a 2FA system or an MFA system, then maybe it's a little bit better than that. Phone. So when somebody calls you, uh, maybe it's a standard smartphone. Maybe you have only got a PIN code. Maybe you're not using fingerprint or Face ID or whatever it might be to log into that phone. If it's just a PIN code, it's not that secure. Maybe if you're sending text messages to that phone as well, you don't have a way of, or your users haven't stopped text messages appearing on the lock screen of the phone. So if someone steals the phone, something you have, they may still be able to answer that text message that's sent to them just by reading the message that comes up on the lock screen. So again, unless you've got some mobile device management in place, you really shouldn't consider phone or SMS that secure. In fact, there was a recent leak, just a few days ago, where a company that handles all of the SMS texts for every provider in the US suddenly discovered that they'd been breached for the past 5 years and didn't know anything about it. So we don't know the ramification of that leak yet and how widespread it was, but potentially some unauthorized person was able to read every text message that's ever been sent to any phone in the US. So yeah, don't trust SMS all the time. It's not as strong as it used to be. And again, one-time passwords sent either via SMS or um, uh, yeah, SMS or email, really. You have to understand that it's how those messages, how those one-time passwords are generated. So if it is just a device, maybe a thing on a key ring, someone steals those keys, it's just something you have. That number is still visible on those keys without you having to do anything else. So it's only really one factor of authentication. And then you've got other authentication services, like the common ones that we see today. So Microsoft Authenticator, Okta, Ping Identity, YubiKeys. They're pretty good because normally it's something you have and something you know. So you have to be able to get hold of the phone and log into the phone to then access those applications. So they're pretty good. You could have certificates on YubiKeys, those sorts of things. So yes, they are much better than those other ones that I've previously discussed. And then finally, biometrics. So that's really kind of where we want to be. The nice thing about biometrics is that usually people have already got them. So, Face ID, Touch ID on their mobile phone, they're already familiar with them and they're very simple to use. It means users aren't going to forget them. If they scan their fingerprint or use Face ID, all they literally have to do is look at their phone. And it normally means that they have to, again, have the access to the phone, unlock the phone with a PIN code or their face, and then present their face or their fingerprint. So something you have, your phone, something you know, your PIN code, something you are, but it's all rolled into one. So yeah, that's my sort of verification strength chart. So the closer to the greens you get, the better. But also, we could use a combination of those red and yellow ones to give us a stronger sense of that person being that they are who they say they are on the other end of the phone. We call it flexible multi-factor authentication. So let the user make use of what identity services they have available at that time. So don't just tie them down to one method, because you can guarantee that they'll lose the phone. So always try and keep a backup method available if you possibly can. And maybe even have a manual process, maybe even be able to reach out to that user's manager, have that data somewhere, talk to the manager, authenticate them, and then ask them to communicate with the user. But it is I know at that point it becomes a little bit more onerous, but ultimately it's the security of your users, the security of your company, and the security of your company's data that is really the most important thing here. So, and of course, another attack vector that lots of people are doing as well, or lots of bad actors are doing, is actually pretending to be the service desk and calling the user and saying, "Oh yes, please, we're going to send you an email or a text message with a link in it. I need you to click on that and enter your username and password or whatever it might be." So always try and train your users to look out for these things. Um, Try and have regular um, security training courses for them. Tell them about these threats. They might not be new to us, but they will be new to some of your users. And then also always try and adopt the simple rule that if they do receive a call from the service desk, tell that user to hang up after the call and call the service desk back. Don't just take the word of the user at the other end of the phone. So it's not just users calling the service desk that's the problem, it's service desk potentially calling the users as well, or bad actors calling the users as well. So don't forget that particular vector. So what can Spec Ops do to help out in this particular regard? So we have a solution called Secure Service Desk. And what this allows us to do is to verify the user at the other end of the phone using strong authentication factors. And normally they're authentication factors that you automatically enroll the user with. If you have our self-service password reset solution as well, you can use other ID services that users will have to enroll with, but you can just use Secure Service Desk on its own to verify the users at the other end of the phone. And that's where lots of businesses are now looking to strengthen their posture in this particular regard and adopt this particular solution. So we support lots of different ID services. It talks about on here on this slide, we Okta and Semantic VIP. We also support things like Apple Touch ID, Face ID, Google Fingerprint, if you want to go to that biometric level as well. And it also, as I mentioned, is based on the same platform as our UReset system. So you can still offer on top of that a self-service password reset, so you can completely avoid those calls at all, and also issue recovery keys for things like BitLocker or a semantic endpoint encryption as well. So if you've got endpoint encryption systems and you get calls from users saying they're locked out of their machines, they can self-service recover those keys as well. So let's have a quick look at how this is going to work. So I'm just going to share my screen with you.
And Darren, whilst you're just getting that prepared, just
Yep.
a reminder to everyone that they can submit questions. Typically, we try to keep the overall talk short on these and give people Q&A at the end. So if there's any real case scenarios that you have queries about, please feel free to submit them during the talk.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. So what I'm going to do is just mirror my phone as well. Hopefully. There we are. So you'll have to use your imaginations a little bit. So I'm both the service desk over on this Windows 10 PC over here, but also the end user on this phone here. And so let's say I'm the user. I call the service desk up, and the service desk says to me, "Okay, what's your username?" And I say, "Yeah, it's Mr. ZZ user." Service desk says, "Okay, Mr. ZZ user. Before I can help you, I need to verify that you are who you say you are." So okay, that's fine. So service desk searches for Mr. ZZ user over here. And that brings up the details. Notice up here in the top right hand corner, it says unverified. So at the moment, this service desk agent isn't able to get the user's recovery key or reset that user's password for them. We need to verify, I've enforced verification in this particular platform. You don't have to, it's a configurable option, but I think it makes a lot of sense in this particular regard. So we've got the verify identity tab up here. I can also see user details. So if I need to find out the user's manager, for instance, I can do that. I can also see what identity services this user is enrolled with as well. So there's the manager here. It's pulling information from Active Directory. I can see which identity services they're currently enrolled with. But let's go back to the task in hand, and that's verifying the user. So I've got 5 options to quickly verify that user. So I can use a text message. I can send them an email to their corporate email address. That's just like a one-time code. I can send a one-time code effectively to their personal email. Plus, this user is already enrolled in Duo or Okta-Verify. So let's do something basic. Send text message. Now, notice the service desk isn't told what that message is. So you can't have anybody on the service desk pretending a user called, verifying them, and then doing something malicious with that account. So we have a text message that's just appeared. There we go. Your SpecOps one-time code is 614467. So the user relays that back down the line. In fact, let's get it wrong. Let's say they sent the wrong message. Verify. No, sorry, sir, that was the wrong code. We've got a few more attempts before you're locked out and I have to put the phone down. Can you try that again, please? So, okay, let's get it right this time. 467. Click verify. Yes, the user's now been verified. We've got the little verification green tick up here and a little countdown as well. So this user is going to be verified for 5 minutes. So in that time, I can now go on and reset that user's password or generate their recovery key or work with any request that user may have. It might not be a password reset. It might not be a recovery key. It might be anything. But if we can build this process into the service desk interaction, then that whole service desk interaction is going to be much more secure. If the service desk agent still isn't quite convinced that it is the same person on the other end of the phone, maybe they want to choose another form of identity. So again, we could say, well, let's use Duo. And I can either send a push via Duo or I can send a passcode. So I'm just going to use something like push. So send push. And hopefully my Duo will wake up in a second. I love the demo gods. So here we go. Request waiting. Tap here to respond. Yep, that's definitely me. Approve. I've obviously got the phone unlocked already. And now the user has been successfully verified with Duo. And if I wanted to use something like Touch ID or Face ID, there's some advanced options over here. So I've got things like SpecOps fingerprint. So if I click this, what I need to do is I can send a text message or an email to that user with a URL to click on. So again, we've got a URL over here where you can open the fingerprint app on this device, and literally all I have to do is look at the my phone, and I've successfully signed in with that biometric. So that's using something I have, something I know, and something I am, all rolled into one. So yeah, as you can see, pretty simple process. Not much for the users to worry about, and very easy for the service desk to do. It's not going to impact on their call time too much, and then they can proceed to help that user out. But of course, if any of these things have failed, then the service desk agent can just put the phone down and hopefully avoid any kind of scam that that bad actor was trying to inflict on your company or on that service desk. So let me stop sharing, quickly get back to the slides. So back to Spec Ops Solutions now, this kind of fits in with what we do. So we've got Secure Service Desk over on the left here. And as I said, it's part of the Spec Ops authentication platform. So that's the key recovery for BitLocker and semantic endpoint encryption, for UReset, for self-service resets using those same identity services we saw a couple of seconds ago in the demo. So users could use fingerprint, or they could use Duo or text messages to prove their identity and reset their own passwords and unlock their accounts. But also to make up that sort of password story, or to complete that password story, I should say, we also give away a free tool called SpecOps Password Auditor. So unfortunately, the dawn of passwordless is still some time away, and until that time arrives, all applications that support passwords, um, we really need to make sure we've got strong passwords on all of our user accounts. So there's a free tool called SpecOps Password Auditor that you can take from our website. It's completely free, and it will tell you who's currently running a compromised password in your network, and yeah, you can then go and do something about it. It's not going to crack your passwords or do anything like that, but it does use a database of 750 million leaked password hashes. So yeah, if anyone has ever heard of Have I Been Pwned, it's a bit like that, but on steroids. Other than that, we also have the ability to use that same database and an even larger database, believe it or not, to block weak passwords using SpecOps Password Policy. And so when you combine all of these solutions together, you end up with a very strong security posture when it comes to your passwords within your Active Directory. So hopefully we've got some questions. John, do you have anything for me?
Yeah, we've got a few that have come in. So yeah, just a reminder, there's the questions tab if people want to submit. Hopefully we'll be able to get through them all before the end. So first question, are MFA options using a phone, i.e. SMS biometrics, only advised using company hardware, or are personal devices okay? Are there any tips for keeping personal devices secure?
That's a really good question. I mean, privacy is a big thing these days. So first of all, you kind of really need to understand whether your users are happy to use personal devices. I would ideally try and push companies to issuing users with mobile devices, with corporate controlled mobile devices, because then you can lock down things like text messages appearing on the lock screen of your on the lock screens of your phones. You can lock those things down. We have done some work with other companies in the past where they didn't want to give a phone to everybody because it gets quite expensive quite quickly. And for those sorts of organizations, you can use things like YubiKeys. They're a relatively cheap way of providing a a third party authentication. Cost £20, or £40 if you want to get the posh version, and it's a great way of giving someone the ability to self-service reset or authenticate themselves. So maybe for people that need a corporate device, buy them one of those. But for others that maybe don't or shouldn't have a mobile device maybe with them when they're working, maybe invest in the YubiKey, so just a key ring that fits on their keyboard, on their key ring, I should say.
Thanks, Darren. Without investing in a third-party solution, what steps can easily be achieved to improve out-of-the-box functionality? So I assume that's related to user verification.
Yeah, not a lot, unfortunately. Reliance on sort of well-known information, as I said earlier, isn't good. So, oh yeah, I recognise that guy's voice. That's not going to pass terribly well when it comes to your auditors, checking how you're doing things. And as we've already seen in one of the examples right at the beginning, someone used a deep fake to fake somebody's voice. But even things like, what's your postcode or date of birth or employee ID, they're so easily gathered these days. It's a pointless exercise. So out of the box, you don't really have any choice. There isn't anything that all of these Active Directory systems, they were all created before social media. They all came out in 2000, when Facebook wasn't the thing and Instagram wasn't the thing and LinkedIn wasn't the thing. nowadays people put so much of their personal life online. You can't really rely on that well-known data to verify who your users are.
Thanks again. How does this compare as a user verification solution compared to a SSPR solution? Is it used instead or as well as?
I would use it as well as. So SSPR, so self-service password resets, that's only one reason the service desk would call user would call the service desk. That's not their sole job. You can use this alongside your self-service password reset system to handle all of the other queries that your users contact you about. So it's very much they very much complement each other. The SSPR system will take away a vast chunk of your users of those dreary password reset calls and account unlock calls that your service desk has to handle every Monday morning. But the secure service desk will actually help you strengthen your security posture for any communication that comes into the service desk.
Thank you. How long does a solution like shown typically take to get up and running?
So secure service desk on its own literally is up and running in 2 to 3 hours. It doesn't matter on the size of your organization. It's very, very quick. One of the great things about Spec Ops is that we don't just sort of sell you software and walk away. We will even handhold you through the entire process. So, and that's even on a proof of concept. So always feel free to, if these sorts of things interest you and you want to give it a whirl, just get in touch with us. You may even speak to me if you're based in the UK, and I will take you through the whole process. And then we're always going to be there for you down the line as well. So never, think that you have to sit there and scour our website to try and find answers. It's one of the great things about us. We always want to maintain that relationship with our customer base. So always feel free to contact us, drop a note to support, contact me directly, and we'll help you out further down the line as well.
Thank you. What happens if, like in the EA case, the user says they have lost their phone in order to be authenticated?
Yep. So you can't always rely on mobile devices to be available. And that's where things like YubiKeys can really come in useful as well, because it's another physical device, maybe attached to their keyring. If that's not available, then you have to fall back on more manual methods. So maybe contacting that user's manager and then asking that manager to contact that user and then come back to you. So you have to think about these alternative ways of verifying that user. But yeah, that's really down to a company basis and whether you have that data available and whether you have those other methods available.
We saw recently with the YubiKey, they have the biometric version now as well. That was
Exactly.
recent news.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean that makes them even more attractive. They're a little bit more expensive, but yeah, at least you don't have to pay a contract for them like you would on a phone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Darren. So we're out of questions now for today. Just a reminder, there's the assets section where you can get the slide deck would be available after the on-demand version is visible as well. And for those that weren't able to attend, obviously we'll get an email with this. So thank you everyone for joining, and see you next time.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye bye.